and see what happens? How do we ballpark amperage? All right, I see this is crickets here.
The wheels are turning.
Meep, meep, meep. Okay, so how do we ballpark amperage? How do we figure it out? How do we figure out somebody hands me a rod, what do I do?
Oh, you look at the,
Classification, no?
yeah, your
Okay, the classification, good. Okay, so the classification on the rod is we'll say 60-10. How's that going to help me? Uh-huh. How is that going to tell me how my ballpark goes? What else am I going to need to look at?
The tensile strength?
No. How does tensile strength?
The physical diameter of the
Diameter of my rod. So let's say we're industry standard, 1/8 inch rod. Now what do I do? I know it's an 1/8 inch rod, and I know it's a 60-10. I know what polarity I'm going to run it in because it's a 0, right? Where do I put my amperage?
No.
Okay, you could, but let's get a little bit more scientific about this, right? So what we do, let's turn this into a decimal. Anybody know the decimal for 1/8 inch? .125. If you guys don't know the decimals, just memorize them. It's a little bit easier than trying to figure it out every time. 1/8 inches is industry standard, okay? I'm gonna put this into a decimal, and it comes out to .125. Here's my ballpark. Doesn't mean it can't go up or down, but this gives me a starting area. So now, if I have an 1/8 inch rod, I can ballpark it, and if I look through all of like the charts that say 60-10, 70-18, 60-24, whatever it is, it's probably middle of the line in all of those rods. Okay, so that means that I'm able to ballpark just about every 1/8 inch rod, as long as I'm running on the correct diameter, or I should say polarity, sorry, not diameter, but polarity, okay? As long as it's the correct polarity, I'm good. Okay, so now this tells me, all right, it's a great idea. Now, set in stone? No.
That's why it's a ballpark.
Right, but sometimes people don't understand ballpark. They think this is I have to do it all the time. No, this just gives me a jumping off point. This tells me, hey guys, great idea, let's try it here. If it works, cool. If not, I need to make an adjustment. So now that falls into good welds, bad welds. We kind of touched a little bit upon it. So, what makes a good weld? What makes a bad weld?
A little too much and a little too low.
All right, I hear you. Okay, well let's actually really discuss it.
Okay.
Good weld. Let's think about some of the variables that we have to create a good weld. So, what are they? What is something that we have to create a good weld?
A steady hand for one.
Okay, but I want you to think about the variables involved, not just like steady hand,
Right.
like physical variables.
Penetration.
Huh?
Penetration.
How do I get penetration?
Arc length, straight.
Excellent, arc length. Okay, how do I know I have a correct arc length?
If you're seeing too much spatter, you're probably not within a good range.
Weld.
my arc length should be equal to the diameter of my rod. What is the diameter of industry standard? 1/8 inch. So what should my arc length be?
1/8.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so now we have arc length. What else?
Travel speed.
Good, travel speed. How do I know I have a good travel speed? What am I gonna look at?
The
Your
your
weld puddle
the
or?
width, yeah, the width of your
Okay, so the width, what about the height?
height.
So I'm gonna look at the width and the height and all of that's involved so that I can say, okay, too fast, too slow, right? And I can look at that. Now, we know for sure that if your bead looks like it's running away from you, it's what?
Too fast, huh?
Too fast, or what's the other thing? Too hot. All right, so what is relational to too hot? Amperage, good, amperage. So we have to have the correct amperage. Good. Okay, so now we know where we can ballpark, right? But what else can help us having the correct amperage? What are we gonna look at? This is being very critical of your weld, right? I need to look at the profile of my weld. I need to look, is it really, really flat? Is it really, really wide? Or is it sitting on top and it's really just kind of sitting there and like this versus being kind of like streamlined? So when we look at amperage, or even just a good weld in general, we want it to sit on our plate, and we kind of want to have like a smooth ramp up, kind of like that. We want it to have smooth toes and smooth edges, so we know that this area here and here got good burn in. Okay? We don't want it to, if we sit on top, right? Kind of like this. What is that? Either too cold or
Fast.
too slow. Right here, like this, would be sitting on top. Now, because it's kind of like, it's not hot enough, so all it's gonna do is just stay on top. Okay? If it's too hot, you're barely gonna have nothing and it's gonna be really, really wide. Okay? But too hot and too fast of a travel speed can almost mimic each other. So my suggestion is, if I think I'm running too hot, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lower it a little bit. And then I'm gonna try it again, because we know that travel speed and amperage are very closely related, right? I see the red hot plate, and physically and in our brains we say, ooh, too hot, move fast. Right? So they kind of relate to each other. If it's too hot, we're gonna move too fast. So we have to make sure that when we're looking at our bead profile itself, we see that it's not too tall and it's not too wide or flat. We're kind of happy in between. Okay, making sense? All right, what else can we add for good weld? What else makes a good weld? Who's working on horizontal? Tell me, what makes a good weld when we're talking about different positions? What really was most difficult about that?
Understanding
The
The
puddling.
manipulation or what?
Yeah, the puddling. Yeah. Oh, angle. Yeah.
And,
There we go. Angle. We have to have the correct work angle and the correct travel angle. Work angle. This is more relational to like position. Travel angle is like whether I'm pulling it and dragging it or pushing it. Okay, so the best way to look at this is when we have slag, we drag. Okay, so this means that my arc, so this is my plate, and I'm going like this with my arc, okay? I want to pull it with me. When we push like this, we'll have a tendency to get slag inclusions. Okay, so we always want to drag anything that has slag on it. So that goes for flux core as well. We want to drag it along so that we don't get it inside of our weld. Anything else that we need to add? Average, arc length, angle, travel speed. All right. What makes a bad weld?
The opposite of that.
All right. Okay. Well, not exactly the opposite. So if we don't have this correct,
We just have a bad weld in general.
so you're gonna be, everything's off. It's kind of a snowball effect, right? If I don't have my correct arc length, I'm gonna have spatter maybe, right? And then maybe I think, oh shoot, my amperage is way off. And then I lower it, right? And then, okay, yeah, great. So now I'm having to slow down with my travel speed. Now my profile doesn't look so great. And I'm wondering what happened. Or my angle is incorrect and I'm getting like the little shark bites. Those are called undercut. Okay? So angle and travel speed can affect my defects. So this is where we come into defect. What is the difference between a discontinuity and a defect?
I put discontinuity was more of a physical or mechanical problem in a way.
Okay.
And then
When we
defect,
talk about discontinuity, we mean, let's break the word down.
discontinuity.
Not continuous.
Right.
Meaning there's a break in our weld. So that can be any type of error. That can be porosity, undercut, underfill, whatever it is. That's considered a defect. Or excuse me, a discontinuity. So when does it become a defect? When it exceeds the code or standard.
Say that again?
A discontinuity becomes a defect when it exceeds the code or standard.
Oh,
Yeah, I get it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I might have to be able to get away with a little teeny tiny spot of porosity. But when that porosity becomes too great or there's too much, it's exceeding the code or standard, which means
it's a defect.
it's a defect, and that means it has to be removed. Okay, so what types of defect can we get with stick? Okay, so slag inclusion. What else?
Rust.
Porosity. We can also have lack of fusion, right? And lack of penetration. How do we get slag inclusions? Oh, wait, we forgot one here. I knew I forgot. Manipulation. If we manipulate our rod incorrectly, we can have issues, right?
Yep.
So, slag inclusion. How can we get it?
By the wrong manipulation.
Incorrect manipulation, right? So if we're doing a manipulation like this,
Wrong welding technique.
okay, so that would be incorrect technique, right? Incorrect manipulation. How else can I get slag inclusion? How would you
Slag.
do?
Maybe you can slag on your welder trying to weld it.
Good, yes, yes, yes. Do not let any old timer tell you, oh, don't worry about it, it'll burn out. Do not fall for that lie. It's a lie. It's a myth. Yeah, more than likely it's not a big deal, but it will not burn out. It's not a good practice to have. Clean your welds well. Because when you stick that bead on top of it and it's dirty, you're gonna have problems further down. It might get, slag inclusions, but you can also get porosity. You can also have all of these other things snowballing the problems you have already. Okay, how about porosity? How do we get porosity?
When there's like air comes in, right?
Okay, let's discuss porosity. So, porosity is where oxygen and nitrogen enter our weld due to lack of shielding. Now, we know that oxygen and nitrogen are what? A gas, right? So they enter the weld, and as it's starting to solidify, they say, oh wait, I don't want to be stuck in here, let me come out. And out these bubbles come in a form of a hole because it's starting to solidify. Now, have you ever welded over porosity? What happens? It comes back.
Yeah, just creates a bigger pocket.
Because ultimately, there's little bubbles still stuck in there. So now let's slap something on top of it and try it again. It's like shaking up a can of soda, putting the cap on it and saying, okay, now let's open it. And it goes, right? Oh, let me put the cap back on, right?
So you get grinded?
So you have to grind it out. Grind out your porosity. Now, if it's an teeny tiny bit, okay, we need to work on technique. More than likely, most people get porosity when they start or when they stop. Why? When they start, when they strike. You're coming up too far, and when you strike, you're leaving the weld kind of open for that shielding, right? So we want to make sure that we strike accurately and where we need to be so that we're going to give coverage to the beginning of our weld. Now at the end, right, we lift off. And if we're lifting off too quickly before it starts to solidify and all of that, we're going to have a little hole there. What other reason can I get porosity? Incorrect arc length. If your arc length isn't close or close enough and you're long arcing, that's going to happen. Well, not only that, you're going to have a lot of spatter, but you're going to get porosity. You're not covering what you need to cover. Now the other thing is going over dirty material. Now 60-10 is kind of meant for it, right? We know that it's cellulose sodium, which means we know it's going to dig in and pull out all of those impurities. 60-10 was designed to go over rust, dirt, mud, paint, just about anything, okay? Now, if you try that with others, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't, because it was never designed for that. So, you can run into issues with porosity because you have dirty material. Okay? Make sure your material's clean. Hedge your bets, guys. Okay, the other one, undercut. Why would I get undercut? What are some of the things that can create undercut?
Manipulation.
So, incorrect manipulation or incorrect angle. So if I'm aiming towards the wrong area, I might be cutting into my material or cutting into the bead next to it if I'm incorrectly aiming and have an incorrect manipulation. So like a lot of people will do this on vertical as they're coming up. Now what am I doing when I'm coming across with the arc? I'm cutting with my arc, right? And I'm not leaving anything there. It's cutting in there and I'm not leaving anything, any material to stay.
So you gotta pause.
Good.
What would be the right way to do it?
So when we go, we don't want to whip our hand around. We want to keep it straight. And it's more of a hold, hold, hold,
Not a whipping shit.
hold. We don't want to whip because that's when we get the undercut. We want to pause there for a moment so that our filler metal is directed and it fills up that area that I just cut into, right? Because we know that arc's going to cut to some degree. So if we leave it there for just a second, it fills it up, and then I can keep on moving without undercut. The other reasons we get undercut is it's too hot. I might have correct technique, but it being too hot means I'm trying to put it there and it's just burning away. There's no ability for me to keep it in. It's just, how come, and then your weld's also going to be really, really flat, right? Because ultimately we've burnt away just about everything. So heat. The other one is,
Trials.
if I'm moving too quickly on my joint, I'm not giving it time to fill, right? So that's where that pause comes in. Regardless of what we're doing, we give it a little pause to fill in. If I'm just moving along, and I'm moving too quickly, there's not gonna be anything to put there, right? So I'm cutting in and moving, cutting in and moving. That doesn't work, right? All right, lack of fusion and lack of penetration. What do they mean by that?
It's like a fusion, it's not joining, it's not combining.
Right. So when we look at a weld, let's say we have a backer on this. And we're welding it, it looks pretty good, it's all hunky-dory, but maybe my bead placement was incorrect. And I might have this just little section right here on the edge that just didn't catch very well. And this little pocket here is lack of fusion. It's not fused to the surface. So this is also why good bead placement is important. So when I say, hey guys, pay attention to how you're doing this, have good habits now, right? We want to make sure that when we put it in, everything is overlapping, but when we have a correct overlap, am I gonna miss? No, I'm not missing my toes. I'm not missing my edges. Everything's in there. Now, when we say lack of penetration, usually this has to do with joint design. Think about having an inch block, right, or inch material without any edge preparation. And I'm doing stick, and I have an 1/8 inch stick, and this is a 1/4 inch root opening. How far am I gonna get into this material?
Not very far.
Not very far, right? So I'm probably only gonna get about right here. When this called for complete joint penetration. So, lack of penetration, right? This also applies to this. If I don't go all the way down in my root and have good penetration into my backing plate, I can have lack of penetration. It's not where it's supposed to be. Okay? So now this falls into edge. Everybody got this? Okay. So now
Stay tuned for another part. Weld the world.